What is going on, guys? Vikroy checking in. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's been a while since I posted. I think this is my first video in the new year that I'll be posting. The reason for this is if you guys are familiar with the situation in Canada, specifically in Ontario, we went through like our millionth lockdown, so things were closed, including gyms. But now that's the end of the month, things are starting to slowly ease out, and restrictions are being a little lifted with limited capacity, so gyms are now open, so I can go back to making the content I want to be making. But in this video, I'll be going over a compound movement that I feel that's not talked about enough compared to the main three in squat, bench, and deadlift, which is the overhead press. I'll be going over the muscles that are worked in this movement, the typical form you want to incorporate when doing this exercise, some common mistakes I see when people make when performing this movement, and some key tips to help you improve when doing this exercise. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so starting off with the muscles that work during the overhead press movement is obviously the shoulder muscle, also known as the deltoid muscle, which is broken down into the posterior deltoid, which is the rear side of the muscle, the medial deltoid, which is the middle portion, and the anterior deltoid, which is the front portion of the muscle. So when it comes to a front-facing push movement such as the overhead press, the anterior deltoid and the medial deltoid is engaged more compared to the rear deltoid. So when it comes to secondary muscles work during the overhead press movement, I would say as the triceps, specifically the lateral and medial head of the tricep. The long head of the tricep is engaged a little bit more during overhead over elbow extension type of movements, such as the skull crushers and overhead rope extensions. And lastly, the last group of muscles I would say is engaged the most during the movement is your overall core when it comes to stabilizing and keeping and protecting your spine, and specifically the serratus muscle when pushing the weight over your head. So now moving on to the form when performing the overhead press movement. When it comes to hand placement, instead of having your hands wider than shoulder width like you would in a bench press, make sure to have your hands a bit more closer in like you would in a close grip bench press, so you'll be at a stronger spot. So when it comes to the starting position, make sure to have your chest topped up and the bar resting firmly on your upper chest and in the middle of your palms without your wrist extending far back. And then as you can see, I have my head tilted a little slightly back. The reason for this is because when you push the weight directly up, you don't want to uppercut your nose on the way up and have a giant nosebleed in the middle of your workout. So when you push the weight up and the bar crosses past your head, bring your head forward. And then when you bring the weight back down with your elbows tucked in, bring it back to your starting position at your upper chest. And in the next clip, I'll be going over why it's important to have your elbows tucked in when performing this movement. Alright, so on to the common mistakes when it comes to performing the overhead press. For one is the flaring of the elbows. Unlike in a bench press where the flaring of the elbows can be beneficial in terms of engaging your chest more, with the overhead press, not so much, because you're kind of restricted in terms of how freely your arms can move due to you using a barbell. So good practice to have is to have your elbows tucked in when performing this movement, just so you'll be at a stronger position and you'll be protecting your shoulders overall. So the second most common mistake I see is probably the most dangerous one, is when people lean way too far back when performing this movement. If you want to take a one-way trip to Snap City, this is how you do it. And trust me, as someone who's been there a lot, you do not want to go there. So I feel like this happens a lot because instead of people leaning their head back, they lean their whole body back in their starting position, which is dangerous because they can compromise their spine. So in the next clip, I'll be showing how to keep a neutral spine and keep upright during the movement. Alright, so on to some tips to improve your overhead press. For one is squeezing your glutes during the movement, as this addresses one of the common mistakes I mentioned in the previous clip in not having a neutral spine, which can compromise your lower back and lead to potential injuries down the line. So remember to squeeze them peaches in order to keep your spine neutral and your torso upright during the movement, just so you'll be at a more stable position and minimize the risk for an injury. Alright, so the next tip I would say is something you can really incorporate into several exercises is your breathing techniques, and specifically for the overhead press, ideally you want to incorporate a technique where you're exhaling from the starting position and when you're pushing the weight up, just so you can add more power in the movement, and then when you bring the weight back down to your starting position, inhale. Alright guys, so that concludes the video on the overhead press. If you guys found this video to be helpful and informative, please leave a like and a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Come up out the cracks and try to tell me how to get it poppin' really. Way too motherfucking educated to be spending any time just talking with me. Many people waiting on me in the lobby, time to board.